Hello and welcome to Builders. I'm your host, Lee Haynes, and today's guest is Lobo Olsson, Director of Engineering at HelloFresh, with a focus on engineering productivity and applied AI. Over his career, Lobo has moved across domains, from mobile and infrastructure to cloud platforms and now AI, bringing a rare generalist mindset to leadership in deeply technical environments. He's someone who doesn't just chase what's new, but figures out what's useful. In today's conversation, we'll unpack the real challenges behind implementing AI tooling, how engineering teams can work smarter, not just faster, and what it actually means to build a career that stays adaptable in the age of automation. So lots to get into. Lobo, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Very happy to be here.
Now, you've had an interesting and diverse path, right? As I just mentioned, from mobile to infrastructure, cloud, now AI. How did that journey unfold, and what's the thread that connects all those chapters for you?
I think there are a couple of different threads, but probably two kind of main ones. And actually, the path is a bit more diverse even than what you originally introduced, because I actually started out with product design. So my
Nice.
original degree isn't even in like computer science or anything like that. But end of the day, I am a problem solver and I want to build things that are useful for people. And I think those are kind of the two main lenses that I view the world in. And that's obviously why I started at design. And when I design, I don't mean kind of visual design. I mean more kind of interaction design and like how should things work in day to day. And I think that is fairly well connected with kind of software as well. There is a lot of overlap there. And I studied engineering because I like solving problems. And just happened to be that after graduating, I ended up within the IT industry instead of the kind of more traditional product industry. And the path unfolded from there. So like, how can I help people and how can I solve problems has been the kind of questions I've always been asking myself.
Fantastic. Was there ever a pivotal moment when you realized that, adaptability was going to be like your real kind of competitive edge?
I don't think so. That one is definitely much more by accident. But I am a bit of a restless person. I am a very curious person. So me going kind of super deep into one topic is not something I'm that keen on. There's usually kind of a lot of stuff on the edges that like pulls my attention, and then I kind of continue broadening my view, because at some point you have enough skills to be able to solve like most of the problems. This is bits of the Pareto principle here, the 80-20. Like most people can do a lot of things by being generalists, but there are obviously a bunch of people that need to have the last 20% within a certain domain to be able to solve the really, really difficult stuff. But that has not been what's driven me, but rather like, okay, what's the next more general problem I can solve? And that kind of accidentally led me down a path that meant that I kind of leveraged these skills, but also like having a curious mind around like human and psychology and like how do we help people also connects a bit to the managerial path, which by its nature is a bit more generalized than an individual contributor or some kind of specialist. But a lot of accidents along the way, kind of what friend dragged me into the next project or what the next hire happened to kind of need me to do when I joined their company.
And I'd like to talk a little bit more about this kind of generalist versus, specialist question, because there's always this kind of debate, for want of a better word, maybe. Is it better to go deep or is it better to go broad? In engineering and especially in like leadership, how do you think about like that balance today?
Yeah, I think a lot of that balance, to be honest, because I am somewhat struggling with that myself. I am often in conversation where I'm at least slightly out of my depth. And that is obviously a bit frustrating and kind of gives me a reminder that, okay, maybe I need to go a bit deeper in this topic. At the same time, I also very often see people being very deep within a certain topic, whether they might be leaders or whether they might be kind of individual contributors of some kind. And I can kind of listen to what they're saying, the message they're sharing, or kind of their proposed solution to a problem. And I can see all of these connections to other domains, and I can see why this might be problematic, or why we might be able to kind of pull in learnings from other domains. And then suddenly I feel like, yeah, maybe it's okay that I'm not that deep. But end of the day, I think you always need a mix. And I think, like, generally, my experience within the software industry and a lot of engineering professions in general, I would say, a lot of people prefer to be specialists. Like, engineers like to go deep into the details. They want to understand the nitty gritty. So from that perspective, I think I'm a good person to have in the team, because I have this more generalized mindset. But I can very well imagine that in other industry, and also in certain companies that maybe like are engineering companies but work closer to different industries, maybe they have a need of having more kind of a specialist focus to be able to be successful, to kind of find that balance. But it is always a struggle. Like, I think regardless which path you choose, you kind of see and are a bit frustrated by your lack of knowledge in the other path. But for me, I'm very happy with being the generalist and allow others that I work with to be the specialist, and we can support each other's.
Yeah, and I think it's like, you touched upon it. There are particularly engineers, they really take a lot of pride in being able to understand the kind of nitty gritty, right? The detail. But yeah, that kind of generalist mindset is absolutely important. What's interesting as well is that, in the age of AI and everything now, a lot of people are arguing that AI is making generalists much more powerful, right? Since, there are tools like your Copilot in this context that can fill these kind of specialist gaps. This is what people argue, right? Do you think that AI is tilting the balance, let's say, in favor of generalists right now, or has already done so?
I honestly don't think so. I can see where the argument is coming from, but I think AI raises the minimum bar to a certain extent. And like, a lot of people can, if you've kind of focused on software development and so on, which is obviously kind of my main domain I'm working in and where I'm mostly using AI. Like, AI can fairly easily help people kind of reach a coding level of a mid-level, maybe an early senior. It can plug a lot of the gaps. So if you are a generalist who just have a vague understanding of coding, you can do a lot with AI. At the same time, like, I think a lot of problems need people that are more senior than your average mid-level, like early senior. You need someone with 6, 7, 8 years. You maybe need like a deep database expert on some topic. You need someone who understands kind of scaling of a system. And I think AI often kind of fails at those areas. So it can help you bring you part of the way, but I still think it doesn't really remove the need to have specialists, especially not within the professional context. So if you're just like hobby coding, building like, I don't know, a home automation project at home or something, sure, then AI solves the problem. But within a professional context, within a company that needs to deliver professional services, reliable services, scalable services, I don't think AI takes us all the way. AI is obviously improving a lot, but end of the day, I think AI is not good enough to kind of handle context to really be able to bridge this gap in the near future. So then you either need people that are specialists on AI to kind of help bring all of that context. So like you bridge the gap that way, or you need to have specialists on these different domains that can kind of sanity check what the AI is doing or expand on what the AI has provided. So the AI provides some kind of boilerplate, and then you have experts coming in and kind of building these extra bits and pieces, like bringing that last 10, 20%. So like generalists are definitely being helped by AI for sure, but I don't really think it's shifted the balance. I think it's shifting the perception for people that are kind of outside our kind of specialist core. But I think that is a bit of a mirage, at least for now. Obviously, AI is moving super fast. This answer might change in 2 years' time. Who knows?
Yeah. No, I think I must say I largely agree with everything you're saying there. But is there a piece of advice, or what advice would you give to engineers trying to kind of, future-proof their careers, let's say, staying relevant but without stretching themselves too thin, for example? Is there anything you'd recommend here?
For sure. Like I always think it's good to think a bit broader than your current domain. There's a reason we've been talking about these T-shaped profiles for years and years and years. So I would say that is probably the first starting point. So like if you have already deep expertise or on your path towards developing a deep expertise and you like that, continue. But also think like, okay, how can you do that horizontal part on the T? And my suggestion would be to kind of focus more on the human factor or business factor. So either think about like, okay, are there kind of product management skills I can pick up? Are there things around psychology, things around like design heuristics? There are a lot of fairly straightforward kind of frameworks you can explore within these areas. To kind of help you get some basics and help you start thinking about like not only the tech about how we're solving a problem, but kind of what the problem is we're solving. And kind of similar goes on the business side of the equation. Like, okay, but how does this solution kind of help the business? How do we save money? How do we earn money? Because that's obviously a great way of kind of getting support for your ideas and your projects. And once again, builds that kind of horizontal T. And from there, you can start kind of expanding. Okay. Second step after you've kind of started building those skills is maybe, okay, is there a kind of a secondary expertise I can have? Like if I am a backend developer within Golang, okay, that's my major. What would be my minor in this case? Once I built that T, and I guess you would end with put some kind of triangle shape. So maybe that is the future, talking about triangle shaped engineer.
Exactly.
That has like some more deeper expertise in one domain, a broad base, and then kind of a couple of bits and pieces where they have more knowledge than kind of your average within that kind of primary domain you're operating in. That makes you flexible. It can also kind of help you discover new areas of passion and interest. And connecting this back to the AI conversation, I think that also allows you to use those tools more effectively, because you can start seeing, hey, wait a minute, this network diagram that the AI gave me, that doesn't really seem to make sense. Maybe I need to sanity check this. And your risk of kind of accepting a solution that is subpar or maybe even kind of problematic for future flexibility or future growth. Like it's a lot lower risk there for you to make a mistake.
Yeah. And the triangle shaped profile, you had it here first.
Yeah, I'm gonna trademark that.
Yeah, exactly. But let's talk a little bit about AI tooling, because I know it's something you've worked or working closely with, and there's been so much hype, of course. But I do believe that adoption inside large engineering organizations often seems quite messy. So why do you think so many leaders are struggling to make AI tools actually productive?
Yeah, I think that's the key word there, productive. I think the first problem is that we don't really know what productive means in the
That's the
terms of
thing, right?
AI.
And I think for context here, it's more like we know a lot of companies are experimenting, right? I think that, different places saying like 80% of like tech leaders are experimenting with AI in development workflows, but they're like fewer than 20%. So this is kind of 80-20 again, maybe to go back to that.
Yeah.
But fewer than 20% of them have achieved these kind of measurable kind of productivity gains. So yeah, what do you make of this? Why do they struggle?
So I think, like as I said, I think a big part of the difficulty here is like what is productive, and obviously we do have a bunch of established metrics in the industry, and we can debate on all of these metrics, validity, etc. I think there are some metrics that a lot of people agree are not very valid, like lines of code written or number of PRs merged. And there are obviously metrics that a lot of people think are more valid, like the DORA framework or the SPACE framework. But none of these are perfect. Like all of them are somewhat subjective. All of them has question marks around them. So it's hard to really have like a nailed down, like, okay, if we adopt AI tools like this, let's see what the number says. Is that positive or negative? We can iterate on this. It's hard to kind of do systematic experiments, systematic reviews, because there's so many unknowns, and especially large corporation, they kind of thrive on this systematic approach. We're going to do an A/B test. We're going to divide people into cohorts. We're going to look at the metrics. We're going to do regression analysis. And it's difficult to do that with AI. And I think in many ways, like, I think the question about why people are struggling with AI is the same thing about why are people struggling with adopting agile? Why are people struggling with TDD, extreme programming? There are a lot of proponents for all of these practices that say like they are the best thing ever since sliced bread, and they also many of them also have the numbers to back it up. At the same time, there are a lot of people that are doubtful or maybe can show opposite numbers because there's so much variability here. And then I think another aspect around AI is developing so quickly now. So something that you kind of built 6 months ago might not really be super relevant today.
Yep.
So maybe you were super early on the AI train and you kind of build your own internal agents, and you kind of had a professional account with OpenAI, and you created a whole bunch of guidelines and tried to integrate these tools in your development environment. And well, now just recently, like yesterday, Cursor 2.0 came out, and suddenly kind of they have all of that out of the box, which meant that you wasted all of that time 6 months ago. So I think a lot of people are in that situation that they tried to do things that maybe didn't get the momentum it needed, or was just too costly or time consuming. And now kind of other people are coming out on the market, and now you need to figure out, okay, do I buy the new solution? Do I continue with my solution? And I think also a lot of leaders are somewhat afraid of the rapid changing landscape. People don't want to bet on the wrong horse, which is also kind of holding back some organizations. And I think the third aspect is maybe somewhat counterintuitive, but I also think the ease of access of AI tools today is also somewhat hindering adoption. There's a lot of kind of shadow IT going on. There are a lot of developers using their own accounts, their own tools. There are multiple companies that kind of bought all the different packages, which means that you can't standardize, you can't optimize, and you don't really know what's going on around under the hood, which also makes it hard to really introduce these things in an efficient manner. And on top of all of this, obviously, you have the fact that, as I said before, like AI is not perfect. It's kind of 80% there. So you still need to do a lot of stuff. Even if you have a good AI setup, even if you do like spec-driven development 100%, end of the day, you still need to kind of do a bunch of hand-holding for the AI. You need to teach the engineers about context engineering, etc. Here, I know there are some competing studies out there around like developers actually being slower using AI development tools because the time they need to kind of do all these tweaks and context engineering takes more time than just building the code from scratch. I obviously know there are studies that says the opposite. And there seems to be some evidence around it depending on like your type of org structure and dependencies and type of services you're creating. But once again, a lot of unknowns here that we are kind of need to compete with. So end of the day, like there's a million different reasons here, but I think here are a couple of the key ones, and I think we're starting to see some kind of convergence here. People are starting to figure out how to do these things, but I think we're probably going to be, well, at least a year away from this being kind of more established practices, and people can say, okay, these are actually the AI best practices. This is what an AI first company really means. This is what like a cloud native company really means, etc. Like, I don't know, AWS had been online for 10 years or whatever before people started talking about what cloud native really was and kind of agreed on that. So I think we're seeing the similar thing with AI here, and like the big boom, I would say, kind of started probably like 4 years ago with like the early adopters there. So give it another 6 years and we've kind of agreed on what AI
exactly
means.
the new standard and everything. But I mean, with all this said, Lobo, and in your experience, what kind of problems do you think AI tooling is genuinely good at solving right now, especially for kind of engineering productivity? But also, what do you think is not, it doesn't fit yet? What still needs that human touch or technical intuition?
So I think it's really good at crunching a lot of information, a lot of data, like analyzing a code base, looking through your like internal company wiki, finding like who owns this project or what is the best practices for this type of system, or what is the downstream dependency on this thing that I want to interface with in some way. And I need to kind of understand of what might I affect further down the line. I think it's great for that, and I use it frequently to kind of ask questions about code bases or documentation, and I know my engineers are doing it as well. So it's really good for that, and I think that also kind of continues onwards in like, okay, we can go beyond just asking questions. We can kind of sanity check about like, okay, if this is the best practices we want to follow, is this code base following those best practices? We can put some kind of checks and balances in place and get kind of a general sense of the kind of quality of a certain code base, of a certain system, or where we might need to do some kind of refactorings or upgrades. Like if you have a version upgrade of some sort and there is a lot of like imports you need to adjust, or like a lot of syntax that needs to like, oh yeah, now we need to do this import explicitly instead of implicitly. Like those are things that AI does really well. You still need to do kind of some hand holding and kind of check the coding example it finds, but like it will very, very likely show you the right thing. And even if it's not 100% spot on, it will help you significantly along the way. I think the one that is trickier is around like real future development, and especially in terms of kind of checking its own work. Obviously, some systems are a lot easier. But I know especially mobile development can be really tricky. Okay, we have an existing code base. I want you to add an additional feature. You're going to create this screen, etc. Especially if that code base is a bit on the larger side, you might run into a problem with the context window. But also on the larger code base, you might have a lot of different variations of a pattern. yeah, we have the old ways of building screens and we have the new way, or we have these 3 different teams, 4 different teams, 10 different teams in larger companies that are contributing to the same app. And they're working on their separate modules, but all of those modules are part of the context, and all of those modules will be slightly different because humans are different and we evolve over time, etc. It's going to struggle a bit with making sense of that. And if you don't have good test suites, good build systems, etc., the AI is not going to have an easy time kind of verifying its own work. And whether you ask kind of the same AI or agent to verify its own work, or if you have some kind of verifier step as part of the process, it's still going to kind of run into problems.
Yeah.
So I think that's the big challenge. And I think this is also where it can seem like you're being very productive. Oh, we generated lots of code here. Oh, we have a PR of 5,000 lines and all the different buttons, etc. Yeah, but then someone needs to do a code review of those 5,000 lines.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Then you find some subtle bug somewhere, or you realize that, hey, wait a minute, this thing doesn't scale properly between like the mobile and the tablet and the desktop, and it's structured in a way that it can't really do that. Okay, do I go back to the drawing board and write entirely new instructions, new context, all of that? Do I try to refactor this? Yeah, it can be a huge time sink, and very easy to kind of get stuck. You get this kind of loss aversion. Oh yeah, we created all of this, we don't want to throw it away. So I definitely seen that happen.
Yeah. No, I think it's really interesting because for all its kind of potential and kind of good and everything, I've personally heard developers and engineers kind of saying that these AI tools can also accelerate kind of bad decisions, right? If teams aren't disciplined about reviewing or kind of testing or whatever it may be. So yeah, for all it's good, we must be careful as well.
Yeah. For sure. I can absolutely sign off on that one. I've kind of seen it happen, and also like just looking at coding blogs, etc., and looking at AI generated code more generally, like you're seeing kind of those practices. And I think connecting back to the beginning of the conversation here, the AI is kind of a mid-level, early senior level developer right now, which means that like it will write good enough code most of the time. But yeah, if you have certain requirements, it's not going to hit those requirements because there's not enough of those examples in the training data. If you have a niche language, if you have a bit of a niche programming pattern, or if you have like very special demands on like latency or things like that, yeah, most people don't. Most open source code projects don't. And you kind of run into these traps. And I think this is a similar kind of trap that we as engineering leaders and also like different builders have faced for a long time. Like you look at, oh yeah, we have this best practices blog from Netflix or Google or whatever. We should run all our stuff on Kubernetes. We should do multi-region. We should do multi-cloud. We should do, and most people are not in the situation that these companies describe.
No, exactly.
But here you kind of have a bit of the opposite problem. Like the AI has a regression to the mean mechanic, and even if you're most likely in the mean for the most part, there will always be cases where you're an exception. That's your kind of unique selling point within your business or your market, or regulatory requirements where you can't progress to the mean. So yeah, it's a tricky one.
Yeah. Let's move on to talk a bit about leadership and organizational learning. Basically, as a leader, you're guiding teams through, let's face it, really a really dynamic moment now in tech, right? How do you keep people engaged and curious when so much about AI still feels, let's face it, uncertain or kind of sometimes overhyped, and there's so much new coming all the time. So how do you keep your kind of people engaged and curious?
I think it's really challenging for sure. There are definitely a lot of people in the industry that are AI skeptics in different shapes or forms. Maybe because they are not interested in kind of learning that new technology, kind of connecting back to the original conversation about the triangle shaped engineer there. Like they have their expertise and they might not be that interested in expanding that. Or they might kind of not be interested in changing up their workflows and practices, etc. But on the other side of the fence, you kind of also have a bunch of people that are kind of really AI proponents. They feel that they've seen the light and they adopt that in all manner of practices. And I think as in a lot of other leadership examples or cases, rather, not examples, you have to kind of highlight the people that you feel are approaching this problem in the right way. Maybe not take the kind of most diehard fans of AI, but at least take the people that like AI, that are curious about AI, and like have them do demos, have them showcase how this is helping them day to day.
The torchbearers, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And like do things like internal hackathons that you say, okay, now we're going to try out the system, or hey, we have this thing that we've been annoyed with in our system for ages and we never kind of gotten around to fix it. This was never a priority. Okay, let's hack the system. We're gonna do a mini hackathon. We're gonna solve this problem, but we're gonna solve it using AI. And that's a great opportunity to kind of give people an opportunity to kind of take something they do care about, this problem or annoyance in the system, and kind of connect that back to a tool that they maybe are not caring that much about. But like, okay, if I want to solve this problem, I have to use AI tools. I have to learn that. Okay, and then I have a motivation to learn it. And hopefully, end of the day there, you're going to fix one of those paper cuts in your system or tool or whatever. People have learned a bit more about AI and kind of everyone goes away happy. And you can kind of also, if you need to motivate time spent or capitalization and stuff like that, you can obviously kind of motivate this as a training opportunity, because everyone acknowledged that people need opportunities to train and practice AI skills. And then obviously a lot of just traditional people management, like talking about it in one-on-ones, trying to figure out what they are concerned about, finding ways around it, like take the leadership responsibilities about establishing processes. Like they shouldn't have to figure out how to install the tool. Like you need to make sure that that is documented and that there's best practice. They aren't the ones that should have to go and hunt for an API key somewhere so you can connect Bedrock or Open API or Gemini. Like, okay, there should be a process for that. And like maybe that means that you need to go and align with your internal IT group. Maybe that means that you need to take one of the torchbearers or diehard fans in the group and say, hey, can you figure this out for me? But like make it easy for people to do the right thing. And they are more likely to do it. And we can kind of all iterate and learn along the way. And I think the last thing I want to say there about kind of keeping people motivated, I think it's also very important to kind of listen to these people that are struggling with AI, and like don't dismiss them. I think there are genuine concerns, there are genuine risks with AI, as we talked about, kind of accelerating bad decisions, etc. And like make sure you take those to heart and try to build guardrails to prevent those things. That will make these people more likely to adopt AI because they feel that their concerns are being addressed. But obviously it helps you as well as a leader and creator to avoid the organization from making costly mistakes.
Absolutely. I think it's a really important point you make there as well, because one person's kind of concerns are naturally going to be shared by other people, right? It can't be so kind of specific. But there's another point, or like this kind of growing idea, I think, that AI literacy will be as important for developers as version control or design patterns have been, for example. Do you agree with that? And if so, what could that look like in practice?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. How it would look like in practice, I think, is also something that will kind of shift over time. But for me, a big kind of hurdle that I feel like I've started to get over now is giving AI context in human language. Like, I've been within software development for so long. I am, like, even though I talked about being a generalist, I'm still very much an engineer at heart. And like, I tried to describe things to the AI using that type of language. I gave it mathematical formula. I talked about like sets and functions and stuff like that. And I feel like that didn't really work that well. It's better to talk with it like a human and kind of write it in a plainer language. So that was definitely something I had to learn. And also kind of giving it enough context. When I started using AI, I always thought it was very silly. Like, why should I start all of these messages with telling the AI, hey, you are an expert in X? Like, either it knows it or it doesn't. It has all the same information regardless what I'm kind
It
of
will be an
telling
expert
it
in
here.
everything as well, right? Not
Yeah,
just
exactly. It's supposed to be an expert in everything. Like, why do I need to say this?
yeah.
But like, understanding, okay, what are these different bits and pieces? Why do we say them? Why do we write them? I think that is also an important thing. And obviously, you don't need to do that every time for everything. But especially if we want to use this in a professional context and creating like reusable bits and pieces, like, hey, I can write this prompt every time I've written code to sanity check my own work and kind of get early feedback before I send in it at a pull request.
Yeah.
Then it needs to be well structured. It needs to be well written. I can't just slap 3 lines together and expect a really good result. I need to iterate on that. And sure, I can start with those 3 lines slapped together, but like, test and iterate and expand upon it. And once you've kind of done that enough, well, okay, then you're maybe creating it as an agent. And then you need to figure out, okay, how do I save that agent? How can I trigger that to run autonomously once I do a commit? So every time I commit, I don't only run my unit tests, I also run my kind of code review agent on my local machine. And going from there, obviously, like, it's thinking about those next steps. Okay, how do I expand this to my team? Can I share this with my team? Can we have a shared code review agent? Can this be a company agent that anyone can leverage, et cetera, et cetera? So it's both about kind of using the AI itself and thinking about how the AI can be used, but then obviously kind of connecting this to these normal practices we're already doing. How can we standardize? How can we scale? How can we share? And like, go from something I'm doing locally to something that the team is doing, to something the company is doing. Which in turn obviously means that we need to pick up not only AI literacy, I can't say that
Literacy,
word.
yeah.
Literacy. We also need to kind of pick up about, okay, what are the engineering practices around AI? So like, what models to use and how do we manage context, and how do we version control different agents? So and there we're obviously kind of wearing into more traditional software engineering again. But we kind of need to bring those AI skills all the way there.
Yep. To talk then a little bit about hiring and building these modern engineering teams, because I think recruiting engineers today is a completely different game than it was even say 5 years ago. So from your perspective, what's changed most in how you identify and in how you kind of attract great engineering talent?
So I don't think that much has changed, honestly, in the attract part. Like, people are always and have always been interested in companies that are seen as successful, companies that are seen as kind of working with high tech, and then companies that kind of allow you to work on modern stuff. And I think that this is very much true even now within the AI age. It's just that, like, the new technology that people are excited about now is AI and not like Kafka, or Kubernetes, etc., because they are starting to be seen as old tech. So this is kind of the new wave, and that's obviously one of the reasons all these companies are talking about them being AI enabled or AI first, etc., etc. It's to make clear to candidates that, like, AI is a thing here. But this is all part of the same kind of employer branding practices that has always been out there. Like, be visible at conferences, showcase your tech stack, make sure people understand that you can build cool stuff here, regardless of what type of industry you're working in. I think judging people's talent, though, has definitely changed a fair bit. Obviously, there's tons and tons of horror stories, including from kind of friends within the industry that has experienced this firsthand with fake profiles, fake interviews, people doing kind of deep fakes on Zoom calls. Like, how do you know you're talking with the real Lobo right now?
Exactly.
Well, it's not that easy to know. So I think that is a real problem. I don't think it's super widespread, but it doesn't need to be widespread for you to need to think about it. It's the same with, like, ransomware attacks and stuff like that. Most companies never experience that, but you still need to be prepared for it. So you definitely need to think about how do you do your hiring practices? Is it worth having a take-home test when, like, sure, before you had to handle that take-home test might have leaked on GitHub somewhere. But now you have to contend with the fact that people can just put the entire thing into ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude Code and get a working solution out. And if you still run a take-home tests, like, okay, maybe you do the same thing and put that into those systems, and then you kind of compare the tests you get home with your generated code and try to determine, is it statistically likely that this was written by Claude? I don't think that is a reasonable approach, obviously. Like, I'm working with the AI space, of course. I think the reasonable approach here is to adopt AI and have that as part of your hiring process. If you're still doing a take-home test, allow people to use AI and instead force them to, like, spend time explaining their reasoning. Why did they accept this code that the AI had written for them? If they can't explain that, maybe you shouldn't hire them. And if they can, like, explain all the underlying reasoning, it maybe doesn't matter who wrote the code. And same in kind of hiring interviews. Talk about more abstract concepts. And obviously you have the classic kind of design interview with a lot of boxes, etc. AI can do those things as well, obviously, but it's going to be harder for a candidate to kind of cheat, quotation mark here, if they're also having to draw those boxes somewhere and kind of explain why those boxes are there. If you're doing coding interviews, like, do them with AI. Have the test be about how efficient the candidate is in leveraging their tools.
Exactly. Because we're talking about, like, now it's not just, okay, can they master the kind of syntax or, like, whatever language or whatever kind of area function it might be on the syntax level. Now it's a kind of much broader kind of concept that we're talking about here, right? So I think, like, to your point, see how they leverage the tools that they're going to be working with every single day, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is similar to, like, using IDEs, etc. Like
Mm.
that, there's no one, or well, no one. I'm sure there are someone for reasons, but there are very, very few companies out there that forces candidates to kind of sit down and write code on paper
Mm.
without any kind of support tools, because that's most likely not how they're gonna write that code day to day. So like we need to adopt these practices, and we need to be clear and upfront with our candidates, like what is allowed and what isn't allowed, and how are these tools being used in our day to day, so they can also take a conscious decision about like, okay, yeah, I'm okay with using AI tool, but I'm not a torchbearer, and this company is
Mm.
very clearly like AI first, spectrum and development all the way. Okay, maybe I shouldn't join that company.
Yeah.
Traditional kind of culture fit aspect of AI usage as well, because AI is becoming part of company culture and engineering culture, where people fall on different parts of the spectrum,
Yeah.
and we need to be upfront about that.
Mm. And to look ahead as we kind of move into, wrapping up, when you look at the next few years, I don't know, 3 to 5 years, let's say, this kind of intersection between engineering, leadership, and applied AI, what excites you most?
So I'm gonna connect this to what I said in the beginning here. I want to improve things for people, and I want to solve problems. And I do see a lot of opportunity for this to solve problem. Uh, it is a bit of a cliche, but I do think AI is democratizing a lot of technology. It
Mm.
allows people to try things, explore things, do things that they weren't able to do before.
Mm.
And a lot of them are going to do stupid stuff, and a lot of them are going to fail, but
Mm.
a lot of them are also going to solve problems. A lot of them are going to learn things, whether that is for kind of private satisfaction, or for advancing their career, or for solving an actual real world problem. And I think AI is just going to get better and better at that. And I can already see this happening among like both like colleagues and friends. And yeah, I think there are great opportunities ahead.
Mm.
And I really look forward to see kind of what problems might AI solve for me in a year's time here,
Yeah.
both professionally and privately. Uh,
Is there anything that you're personally, cautious about when it comes to the pace of AI integration?
a lot as well. I do really think this is a kind of a, well, coin toss is maybe the wrong metaphor here, but like there are definitely two sides of
Mm.
this. Like all the things that makes this exciting, I think, are also all the things that makes this scary.
Yeah.
Like giving people a lot of power has traditionally been a recipe for not disaster, but like tumultuous
Mm.
things. I can definitely see a future where AI is being used maliciously, and it's not just gonna be like your average person who want to learn more about coding using AI. It's also gonna be your like average criminal who want to defraud people more
Right.
efficiently using it.
Yeah.
Or and I'm not like saying that, oh, if you just prevent the malicious actors, like people might do this by mistake, or people just make bad decisions. People are in tough situations in life, and like depending on the AI, they might get bad advice.
Mm.
And there's also obviously a lot of politics also involved in AI. I think the most polarizing is probably Elon Musk in this regard, but
Mm.
he obviously has a very different kind of opinion on what the AI should do and what type of answers that AI should give, compared to what Sam Altman has, and
Yeah.
like therefore what the ChatGPT model does. Um, and I'm not going to try to sort out what is right and wrong and how do we balance this, but this is a fact, and I think like this is not going to go away in the near future. I don't think it's ever going to go away, and that's obviously also going to affect a lot of things over time, and how these kind of tool usages are developing, and that is kind of scary. But I am mostly optimist. I think AI can be used for good things, and like I think if enough people believe that, and if enough people try to do that, we can kind of outweigh the people trying to use it for bad purposes.
Exactly. I think is like, to your point, what's interesting is that, let's face it, there's a lot of kind of development in this field that's kind of in the hands of a select few very, very powerful kind of companies or even people, right? Who kind of purport to be putting the necessary guardrails in place, and everything should be kind of set up for a safe future. But yeah, maybe you could just elaborate on what, those aspects that maybe could go wrong, that, the scary side of things here, that, if this doesn't, I don't know, not to kind of look or seem too pessimistic, but if this goes, what's basically important for that kind of safe future development in the field, basically?
God, I think this is probably more of a question for data scientists that kind of really understand how all of these kind of guardrails are put into place when you're training models. But I think a important aspect is how to phrase this. I think that things doesn't become too interconnected. And like on to a certain extent, we're already kind of going down that route with MCP gateways and services, etc. We are starting to allow AIs to connect to a lot of different systems, and obviously on my phone, my AI can create calendar invites and call people and God knows what. But I do definitely think there's a real risk of emergence kind of coming back and biting us. Like a two interconnected system starts exhibiting behaviors that we weren't aware of, and like it has downside effects, or the fact that if these systems are too interconnected, that we are opening ourselves up for security risks. Prompt injection is definitely a real thing. I'm sure you can, as a creator of these systems, install backdoors, etc. We obviously talk about things like chat control in the European Union, for instance, when it comes to installing backdoors to encryptions. Maybe there will be asks like that from AI creators as well, and that law enforcement or governments can use this in special ways. And if these systems are too interconnected, I think we're opening up too much risk, and we can suddenly kind of be in a scenario where this can really affect more societal systems. So I think it's important to keep AI implementations controlled. I don't necessarily think that we always have to kind of keep the human in the loop, etc. I think it's okay to have autonomous systems that are AI driven, but you need to really control the context in which they are operating. And like as a creator of these systems, make sure that is possible. Like I'm kind of scared of these AI browsers coming out now. Like how do the creators of those browsers, if I'm using it, if I'm logged into my bank account, if I'm logged into my Google account, etc., how do they prevent like web page with a lot of invisible text on it from acting as a trigger of some sort? Like you can create malicious JPEG images with hidden text in it that you cannot see with the naked eye, but the AI will interpret that as an instruction. So I think those things are scary. I would not use an AI browser today for that reason. At least not in a context where I'm kind of logged into my accounts, etc. Maybe I'll play around with it if I'm, I don't know, planning a trip or whatever and going through like TripAdvisor and all of those like different pages. Maybe I can use it to some success, but then I would still need to go back to the normal browser and I need to log into all my accounts. Like, I'd probably rather use like the normal browser and then have a separate AI account running and like a separate window for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's the scary piece for me today.
Yeah, I can agree. And I think, well, obviously we're going to see advancements made in that, on that side of things, but let's see where we're headed. A final question from me, Lobo. If you had to give one piece of advice to future, tech leaders who are kind of navigating this next wave of AI, this next wave of automation, what would it be?
One piece of advice also, that's very limiting
just one.
here.
Yeah.
I think the best advice I can give is like make sure you're using the tools yourself so you can learn the strengths and the limitations yourself. Like if you don't have a personal opinion on these tools, it's going to be very hard for you to kind of critically examine the information you're getting from your directs. And it's going to be very hard for you to take good decisions on how to use these tools going forward.
Really, really solid advice. Good point. But before I wrap up here, is there anything you want to add, Lobo?
I think we covered a lot here. I think it's been a very interesting conversation. And obviously from the generalist perspective here, I'm not a person training AI models, etc.
I really like that.
I'm just a guy working with them.
Exactly, because I think you're like, let's say, career as a generalist and like this pragmatic take on AI is, I think it's been really nice to hear. A good reminder that this real progress isn't just about chasing every single trend, right? It's understanding the problems deeply, like you've been saying, and kind of building upon that, kind of building deliberately, therefore. So yeah, really thoughtful and well-grounded conversation. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a blast.
And to our listeners, if this episode made you rethink how AI fits into engineering or leadership, share it with your team or that one friend who's always debating whether to specialize or not. Until next time, keep building and we'll see you soon.